Welcome to the Partnership Economy. This podcast explores the power of partnerships through candid conversations with industry leaders. Join our hosts, Dave Yovanno, CEO, and Todd Crawford, co-founder of unpack.com, as they unpack the future of partnerships as a lever for scale and an opportunity to put the consumer first.
Welcome back to the Partnership Economy podcast. This is your host, Dave Yovanno, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brad Hughes, CEO of the Outloud Group. Outloud is an influencer marketing agency, and they've worked with hundreds of popular brands, including Grubhub, Wix, and Athletic Greens. Brad began his career as an engineering consultant, but discovered his passion for helping companies develop new lines of business and revenue along the way. Today, he's immersed in the creator economy and the ways in which influencer marketing can spur real business growth. In this episode of the Partnership Economy, we discuss how content creators have evolved from TV ads and programmatic, and we break down what influencer marketing really means. Brad also walks us through the nitty-gritty of what to consider when running an influencer marketing campaign, the most important common mistakes he sees businesses make, and how to keep up with the rising trends in the industry related to user-generated content and platforms like TikTok. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Partnership Economy podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Bradley Hughes. He's the CEO of the Outloud Group. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. It's always fun to talk partnerships.
All right, to start us off, could you maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself first? We're going to get into the Outloud Group. We'll get into working with influencers because that is the focus of the Outloud Group. But really want to know a little bit more about you, how you got to where you are as CEO of a successful influencer marketing agency.
Yeah, for sure. So what I like to say is I'm a recovering engineer and a recovering management consultant. So I think both of those are formative pieces of my background. So I worked in engineering as an engineering consultant for a while. So I went to business school and so got into management consulting and really got a chance to cut my teeth there. I took advantage of none of the entrepreneurial opportunities presented to me in undergrad or in business school and stumbled upon it in the consulting world and found out I wasn't terrible at it and I really enjoyed it. And from there I said, maybe I should do something like this on my own. Wound up joining this VC as a founder and owner of this business called Grand Circus. This is a coding boot camp program of sorts. And I just started continuing to talk with people. And one of the folks I started connecting with was a guy by the name of Joel Beckett. And so Joel Beckett is the founder of Outloud. And when we connected, it was just Joel. We started to get together for breakfast once a month. He would say I was consulting for him. I would say it was just a super interesting conversation. And after, about 4 months of this, I came to Joel and I said, hey, I think I could really help you with this. I've got this background as a consultant and did a bunch of stuff with marketing there, but I have more of an analytical skills as a engineer. And he said, whoa, I never thought you'd be interested, but I don't really care about this halftime, 3-month thing you're proposing, Brad. Let's talk about what this would look like afterwards. Now it's 8 years later and the business has grown. We're about 70 people and Joel's still involved in the business, but I'm our CEO. And it's been a crazy wild ride throughout these last 8 years.
Now, a lot of people are familiar with paid search, affiliate marketing, display advertising. What would you say is unique about working with influencers, especially as a way to acquire customers or to acquire revenue as a business?
Influencers are unique in that they're really decentralized media companies. So many of us are used to working with these big media companies and trying to work with them to push out brands' messages. And influencers are at scale now where they really are like huge media companies, especially if you're working with the higher end. But yet, on the other side of that coin, is it's still really word of mouth marketing. I mean, their messages are raw. Their audience doesn't expect them to be very polished. Every creator sort of has their own culture within their audience. And I'll use my favorite analogy. It's kind of like the way I behave with my nuclear family, like my brothers and sisters. Actually, I don't have any brothers, but my sisters and my parents is very different than the way I interact with my wife's family, right? And so if you are able to, as you're working with creator, let the creators engage with their family they want to, and not try to parachute in from like the way the brand typically engages, right? That's the analogy of like my wife's nuclear family versus mine. Then you're going to have great success. But when brands kind of come parachute in and say, hey, this is the pentameter to use, the words, the language, it doesn't work very well. But what's cool about influencer is they kind of have this culture and this acceptance already in place, but yet they're at scale. So it's kind of this nice confluence for brands across the scale, and yet the relatability and the approachability to the audience.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, if you look at it, they are the modern day publisher, right? I'm over 50 now. I don't know how old you are, Brad, but a lot of us remember the old popular magazines, Road and Track, Better Homes and Garden, Food and Wine, right? The traditional publishers of content like trends and lifestyle and fashion and things like that. Think of Condé Nast Vogue, for example. Especially with the rise of the platforms, tell me if you agree, like YouTube and, of course, TikTok and Instagram. We've seen like a democratization of content that's being published, right? So they are, in a lot of ways, publishers today. Most people don't think of them that way, right? They're publishing content. It's part lifestyle, let's say, just a day in the life, things that they're interested in. But more and more, they're publishing content about products, like, their experience with different brands and products that they care about. At impact.com, we work with a brand, Lenovo, and you'll have these unboxers on YouTube that, with the white gloves, carefully cutting open the box, putting this new gaming laptop on the workbench, comparing it, hooking it up to all these different diagnostic tests and comparing it to other laptops. It's like really deep reviews and recommendations are now coming from this new form of publisher, if you will.
I think it's interesting, Dave, the way things have evolved. If you look back, this is going back a ways, 20, 30 years, we saw the biggest medium that consumers went to was TV. And before cable, there was network TV, right? So the ABCs, the CBS, the NBCs of the world. And if people wanted to consume content and find someone they really looked up to, they had a handful of choices, call it 5 different choices. And people started to kind of pick their tribe a little bit, right? I like this show. I like this person. And they start to resonate, a little bit more. And that became part of our culture and our vernacular. And then mainstream, network TV evolved into cable TV. And now you've got, let's just call it 50 channels. And suddenly the opportunities for you to find who you connect with, what you're interested in, MTV, USA, ESPN, whatever the case may be, it's a little bit easier to kind of find your connection. And where I think it's gotten really interesting is kind of what you're referring to the last 7 years is now, there's so many different niche creators out there where it's really a beautiful thing in a world where, it can be tough to find your identity. I think influencers are like the modern celebrity, but something that people can actually connect to, right? And there's so many different choices, and we can choose to be part of different communities.
So I think we've established, essentially the viewpoint of the consumer, right? There access to a lot more information out there about everything, but especially products now. Let's get into how brands are engaging with these creators, these influencers to, kind of cut through the noise, be relevant. Let's talk about the business of brands working with creators and influencers. How do brands go about that? How do they find influencers? How do influencers find brands? And how do they, create a partnership in a way that is good for business?
How should I find the right creators to partner with is the number one question that we get asked from a brand perspective. And I think it's interesting because I think it's a really important question, but I think there's more important questions, starting with, as a brand, what are my goals and objectives and what does good look like? And I think a lot of brands are unclear about what they're trying to do. And they might have heard about influencer on a podcast, say, or from, at a conference, and they become convinced quickly that they want to do influencer, but they might not know why they're trying to do it. And I think once you have that crystallization of the goals and the objectives, influencer is a full funnel program. And so in my opinion, it should be measured full funnel. but regardless of what the priorities are, and then starting to identify who are the right creators to work with.
I think what you're touching on, you didn't use the word, but what you're touching on is the authenticity, I think, that they bring to the brand, essentially, right? If you get somebody who really believes in this product and they're talking about their real experience with it, what they really think about it, in my experience, their loyalty is to their audience more than it is to the brand, right? So whatever they're saying about the brand, there is a high degree of authenticity typically. And then you also have the long form of information, right? That is not advertising. Advertising is, a 30-second commercial, or it's a picture, in a magazine, let's say. But if you're talking about commercial content that a creator or an influencer has the ability to create, to maybe use the model that you were talking about, use the AIDA model: awareness, interest, decision, action. I think we talk about like the surround sound, or the concert effect of all of marketing, including advertising. I'm seeing your TV ads or your more traditional forms of advertising being very good at the awareness piece, the upper funnel. But when things get down into like decision mode in that consumer journey, the long form of commerce content that these influencers and creators are putting out there, and the authenticity matched with that, I think heavily influences the decision step. Marketers really need to be aware of that. Like, you can't be spending all this money on the awareness piece and then let the decision go to a competitor, because you haven't really tapped this, sort of channel to kind of get these powerful influencers, creators on board to kind of give some credibility, to your advertising. Could you maybe share an example of a partnership that you think is worth just kind of highlighting on how this actually comes together?
Sure. So one of our clients is Athletic Greens. It's a daily nutritional supplement that you take and you mix with water. It's become pretty big. Most people probably are familiar with Athletic Greens listening. And when we were talking about the right creators to use and the approach, we'd recommended a gentleman by the name of Cletus McFarland. His real name is actually Garrett Mitchell, but his YouTube channel is Cletus McFarland. They hadn't done anything in the car segment. And we said, listen, Garrett, that's his real name again, same person, is someone that his audience knows that he goes 1,000,000 miles an hour and he needs energy, but he tries to do everything the right way. He's a human, so he doesn't always do things the right way. And so they decided to take a chance on, Cletus/Garrett. It was wildly effective, for obvious reasons, can't share the numbers, but you can look and see that in 2022, Athletic Greens is run with Cletus McFarland 9 times, right? So that gives you some idea of success. And it really worked because he just talked about it in his own way. He's like, intentionally a good old boy, and showed himself taking it, and just said, they say that it should be between 8 and 12 ounces of water, but I just put it to the top of this R on the water bottle, right? And so the power in something like that is he's sharing it in his own way. He's kind of like, undermining like any sort of formality or brand speak as part of that, but he's still then talking about the product and then what it did for his for his energy level. Cause it was like, in the afternoons, I feel great. Like, I don't need coffee. Like, and this is all good for you, right? There's no caffeine. And so it was real powerful. And it, turned out to be a new area for Athletic Greens that they hadn't really thought of in the past, as being able to kind of work in this automotive and outdoors segment. And so that was something that was really fun. And Athletic Greens definitely deserves credit for kind of letting a creator go and do his thing. Clearly, that's different than what you might see in a piece of branded content that's going to be more polished with different types of talking points, I guess.
So that's a good example of some success that you've had. How about on the flip side? Anything that you've learned in a partnership, for example, that maybe didn't go so well?
Well, this is a fun one. This is a fun one where another brand that I think deserves credit in by and large for letting creators do whatever the heck they want is Dollar Shave Club. And they've had some tremendous success with that by letting creators kind of do whatever comes to mind. For one creator who has a bit of a untamed beard, if you've seen a picture of me, I might be able to relate to that. But he's got an untamed beard, and he's not the most groomed man in the world. In his own words, as Nicholas Lloyd, his YouTube channel is Lindy Beige. when we talked about doing this with Lindy Beige in terms of having a partnership with Dollar Shave Club, he said, well, I can do it, but I'm going to have to be sarcastic about it. And the message is going to have to be, use this product or you'll look like me. Right. And so he actually did, in my opinion, a masterful job of this and, poked fun of it, but still talked about the qualities of the product and then kept reiterating. It's like, well, yeah, like if you don't use Dollar Shave, which is a great brand to do this, you're going to wind up looking like me. So it was a big swing, right? I think it was a big creative swing, right? It wasn't a huge dollar swing. And so ultimately took that swing and it didn't work, right? I think I thought for sure it was going to, and shockingly I was wrong, but because ultimately he wasn't using the product, and while he could definitively relate to it and have fun with it and talk to its value proposition, I mean, it ultimately he wasn't using the product, and translated into fantastic comments in the video that went very far and wide, but it didn't translate in terms of being able to be viable. Yeah.
If you're enjoying this podcast and want to learn how partnerships can help your business, visit unpack.com, the world's leading partnership management platform.
So we've talked a little bit about some pro tips here so far, and maybe just a more tactical question about just measurement in general, because again, we're comparing in a couple of things that we've talked about with, more traditional advertising or more online advertising where things can be measured. Well, actually, it's getting more difficult now with the loss of IDFA and Google's cookie, et cetera. But could you maybe share a little bit about how you do measure the success or lack thereof in working with creators?
One of the things that we've done, if people are interested, they can take a look on our website. It's up there at outloudgroup.com. But we did a large clickstream data study to understand how many people were actually clicking a link in a video versus how many people were just going to the brand's website or going to a search engine to get to the brand's website. For purchases, the TLDR of it was for everyone measurable purchase that was seen coming in through a vanity URL or a coupon, there's actually 4 total purchases that were happening. So we were significantly underestimating the number of conversions that were happening if we were only looking at that the data that came through an attributable link. So I think from a measurement perspective, it's really important to look at things from awareness, consideration, conversion, and you really want efficiency and awareness, right? So what's your cost per view? Consideration, what's your cost per session on your website? And then you can certainly look at metrics like how long are people staying on the website? How many pages are they visiting? And then conversion, I think, is pretty straightforward in terms of being able to see the value of the order. But then retention's huge too. We've found with a number of our brand partners that the value of a customer through influencer is higher than it is through other channels because they stay on longer, right? They're retained, they order more, and that's been sort of a consistent theme. So when measuring, it's just really important to look at all the pieces of the funnel.
Another thing our audience always loves to hear about are just trends that are happening right now. Top 2 trends that you can think of that you're noticing that are top of mind for you that you feel like sharing?
Yeah, I think one of the big trends that I see is the convergence of user-generated content or UGC, paid social ads, and influencer marketing. And so what I mean by that is, historically, we'd think of a static Instagram post, or maybe it's a YouTube video, but we'd think of creators pushing something out to their audience. And that's influencer marketing, right? But then you can also have these creators develop content or do photographs for you that would live in your emails or on your brand's website, right? Sort of classic UGC. And then paid social, like, hey, we're going to push something out from the brand, so we might hire in a model or an actor or something. And now what we've seen is influencers can be fantastic for all of that. And so brands need to be careful to try to consolidate things, to not have 3 different groups, UGC, influencer marketing and paid social, reaching out to creators, but to really kind of have that all be in one house. So again, going back to the idea of like decentralized media companies which is what influencers are, you want to try to be smart about those points of contact. And it's great now when you can have a creator advocate for your brand on their own organic audience. You can have some of the photography and video be used for whatever you want for a brand. And now the power of influencer paid social, you might know it as creator listing, or content can be pushed out from a creator's audience, but then you can run traditional paid social campaigns behind it where you can target to different audiences and interest groups.
Other trends, I know we had talked in the past about just the battle across the platforms, specifically video. Any trends that you want to maybe highlight there?
Yeah, I think we're still seeing a massive, battle royale for short form video, and there's been some recent moves, right? So YouTube now has a separate shorts and videos tab as opposed to having them all in one. Still being rolled out, might be rolled out by the time you're listening to this across all creators. We're still seeing Instagram direct people away from stories and towards reels. And we're seeing TikTok continue to mature as a platform and trying to figure out more ways to help creators monetize on the platform. Because in the long run, the winner of this will be which platform is most attractive to creators. And right now, that's where YouTube has a huge advantage over the other platforms, particularly over TikTok, because they're able to put ads that are pre-roll and mid-roll inside a piece of video, versus TikTok, because the content is so short, is like interstitial. So it's between pieces of content. So it's more confusing in terms of how those advertising dollars should be allocated. So for now, we're seeing a lot of creators trying to go from TikTok to YouTube because there's more stable, consistent, profitable monetization opportunities. But that can change quick, and we're definitely tuned into that. I think what's clear as a trend is that our attention span is decreasing. What's unclear is who will be the winner from a short form video perspective.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. You had talked about the winner is going to be the platform that is best for creators, but then I think creators go where the consumers are. Right now, TikTok is continuing to grow pretty fast. The trend that I think we're both seeing is how the platforms are inserting themselves between the creators and their audience. Right, it used to be about getting subscribers, getting people to follow you, and that was pretty much the only thing that showed up in your feed. And now with Instagram pushing the reels, and TikTok was kind of built on that more the algorithm feed. It's less about who you're following, and it's who the platform, who the algorithm is recommending that piece of content. It's putting, I think, the creators are actually having to do more work now in this environment, right? Because it's less about who you follow, and it's more about content that the general audience population is interested in, because that's what the algorithm is serving. If this content is trending, that's what's going to show up in your feed now in a reel format or in a TikTok format. YouTube seems to be the one platform that is unique for creators, right? It seems like it gives them a lot more control on how they monetize. It does seem to be more oriented to your feed, like the people that you're following and subscribe to, those show up kind of at the top above an algorithm. But who knows how this is going to play out? But it used to be the only thing that would show up in your feed is from who you're following, and so creators could put out weak content and would still get exposure. Now with the algorithms taking over, your content has to be really good to get exposure. And so who wins at the end of the day? I guess consumers get more of the content that they're after, but it's harder for creators, I think, to to kind of keep producing content that rises to the top. I don't know. I guess we'll see how that plays out. But I think your point though is that video, for example, is the trending format. All right, Brad, we've been chatting for a while. I feel like I can chat with you all day, but we're getting near the end here. I thought we could move to a lightning round segment. So real quick, just first thing that comes to mind off the top of your head, you don't have to elaborate much. but I'm just going to give you a just kind of a list of questions here to respond to here quickly. You ready for this?
Let's do it, Dave. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. What would you say is the number one benefit of working with influencers?
Word of mouth marketing at scale.
All right, next question. What would you say is the most common mistake that influencers or brands make when they're forming a partnership?
The most repeated big mistake I see is actually a really funny one where CMOs or CEOs will have their kids be really into a particular creator and say, you have to work with this. So, and it's not grounded in anything besides one of the leader's kids thinks this individual creator is the bee's knees. So
let's talk about the cost of doing business. What should brands be paying creators?
Really tough to do in a lightning round because there is so much variability, right? Like it depends on the platform. It also depends on the vertical that you're working in. So for instance, beauty creators are going to be much more expensive than car influencers in general. But on YouTube for an integration, brands are going to be looking at a neighborhood of a $50 CPM. Definitely can do it for less. There's a lot of creators who are more. From a TikTok perspective, we also measure things from a CPM perspective. TikTok creators are less expensive than YouTube. It can be as low as $5. I would expect it to be more in the range of like $10 to $50 CPM for TikToks. Instagram stories and reels are really priced pretty similarly. Really, when we're looking at static posts on Instagram, it's more around cost per engagement as opposed to views or impressions. So that tends to be roughly a quarter per engagement in terms of what the creators have historically been averaging. So those are some of the costs. There's a lot more nuance to it, but that at least give your listeners a decent benchmark and at least be in the ballpark of pricing.
Okay, what's the main reason a brand should use an agency like the Outloud Group, for example, for influencer marketing?
An agency partner like us is going to be able to give you the right strategic guidance to help to make sure you're doing the right things in influencer to achieve your objectives. And then the second thing, what I would say is that we have tremendous data that we can use in terms of which creators have been effective for brands over a number of years.
Final question. We focused a lot on brands and creators for a lot of this episode, but if someone's looking for a job, looking to work at an influencer marketing agency, let's say, what skills do you look for? And what skills do you recommend anyone in our audience recommend honing essentially to work in this industry?
First, someone's got to be willing to figure it out because rules are constantly changing on platforms. What works is constantly changing for brands. And so you've got to have this just mentality of we can figure it out and we'll figure it out. So I think that's really important. But at the end of the day, kind of like we talked about at the beginning, maybe to bring it full circle, Dave, I mean, people from all different backgrounds and perspectives can be successful, in this space. And if there's a passion and a willingness to learn and grow, then you've got a seat at the table when it comes to the influencer marketing landscape.
Thanks, Brad. That was great. A lot of helpful information in this discussion today. So that's it for today's episode of the Partnership Economy. Brad, thank you again for joining the show. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Partnership Economy podcast. It was fascinating to hear about the latest trends in the creator economy and all the ways in which influencer marketing has expanded. As Brad pointed out, working with influencers is not just about asking them to post a quick reel or an Instagram story. These days, influencer content can be used across many marketing channels, including email and paid advertising. Brands need to pay attention to the ways in which they could be underutilizing influencer marketing and really analyze their business goals. Working with creators is not about ticking a box. It's about nailing down what exactly you want to drive, whether that's awareness or conversions, and working with influencers with matching historical data. Finally, it was great to dive deeper into the psychology behind influencer marketing, as this really highlights what leads to a successful partnership. As Brad put it, influencers allow their audience to discover their identity and relate to a niche or a community. The further we stray from authenticity, the less likely we are to form a strong partnership. Whether that's brands working with influencers who just aren't passionate about their products and don't know how to use them, or creators who say yes to every deal. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you, Brad, for joining us on the Partnership Economy. And as always, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Partnership Economy, brought to you by Impact.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the show and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts.